Well, hello there, my friends. I'm Kit Boardman. Some of you might recognise me on previous video. I am I am glad you are here safely to join me on this brand new video. But it seems quite scary because it is Halloween season. Are you guys looking forward to it? It seems kind of a bit spooky and the dark night. So hereby, I'll show you guys to read to you. I have got Mary Shelley Frankenstein. This is the most famous horror stories you have probably I've heard. So, I got to have a go read this to you. Probably about an hour. Would you care to join me? Are you sure? Excellent. So, seems a bit creepy. Okay. Remember, sit back, relax. Please enjoy the story with me. My dear sister Margaret, I am writing to you from my ship. We have travelled a long way, and we are now in the far north. It has been a difficult and dangerous journey, but we are safe. There is ice all around the ship, and it is very cold. We are waiting for improvement in the weather before we continue. I have something interesting to tell you. A few days ago, we found a man in the sea. He was travelling across the ice, but his dogs died. He was alone. We were hundreds of miles from land, so we were very surprised. Where are you going? He asked. He was from a foreign country, but he spoke in English. I told him about our journey to the North Pole. The man climbed onto the ship. He was half dead with cold and tiredness. He was thin and ill and could not say very much. We took him to the kitchen so he can warm himself. The poor man was completely frozen. We gave him dry, warm clothes. Then he ate some soup and slept. Now our strange visitor feels better. He was a very interesting man, but he is very unhappy. He wanted to come to the North Pole with us. He often looks out into the water. He was looking for something or somebody. I do not know who he is, but I can see that he has suffered terribly. His eyes are sad and sometimes he seems quite crazy. At first, I did not want to ask him too many questions. He seemed very nervous. Then, when he was not so hungry and cold, we had some interesting conversations. I started to like man and wanted to be his friends. He has a quick and intelligent mind. I told him a little about myself. He knows now that I left England on my travels 6 years ago, and here I am looking for the North Pole. I will not return home until I succeeded. You have hope, he said to me. You have no reason to be unhappy, but I have lost something and I cannot start life again. He looked extremely sad as he said this. Then he was silent and went to bed. Yesterday, the man promised to tell me about his life. My story is very strange, sad and frightening. But perhaps people will learn something from it, he said. I have decided to write it all down in his own words. When I have done that, I will send it to you. I know it will be very strange, Margaret, but I think it will also be very interesting. I will write to you again soon. Your loving brother, Robert Wilton. My name is Victor Frankenstein. I came from Geneva, Switzerland, and my family is one of the most important in that country. I was very young. My parents travelled a lot. I was their only child, and they took me with them. My parents were kind, and they loved me very much. My earliest memories are happy ones. When I was about 5 years old, we stayed for a week at Lake Como in Italy. My mother was a kind woman and visited a poor family on a farm. They had 5 children. 4 had dark hair like a man and his wife, but the other child, a girl, had fair hair and looked quite different. The farmer's wife told my mother the child's history. The girl's name was Elizabeth Levasseur, and she was a daughter of a rich man from Milan. Her mother died when she was born. Elizabeth's father died too, trying to free his country from a bad government. He lost everything, and his house and his money. It was all taken away. His child was left with his family. My mother wanted to have another child very much, and she wanted a daughter. When she saw Elizabeth, she loved her immediately. She wanted to bring Elizabeth up as her own child. She talked to the farmer and his wife about her idea. The farmer and his wife loved the girl, but they agreed. They were not rich. They wanted Elizabeth to have a good life, so they agreed that the child could live with us. Everyone loved Elizabeth. She and I were brought up together, and she was like a sister to me. We were good friends and never fought. A difference between us brought us closer together. Elizabeth was calm and happy. She enjoyed reading poems, and she loved the mountains around her home in Switzerland. I was interested in facts. I wanted to discover everything about the world around me. The world to me was full of secrets, and I wanted to find the answers to them. My parents then had another son, Ernest. He was 7 years younger than me. Later, another brother was born. His name was William. We stopped travelling and moved to Geneva. We also had a country home at Bereth on the eastern side of the lake. Bereth was away from a city, and we enjoyed a quite quiet life there. We spent more and more time at the country home. I became close friends with a boy called Henry Clevel. He was one of the sons of the businessman from Geneva. He was a very clever boy, and he read a lot of adventure stories. I was extremely happy as a child. My parents were always kind to us. They did not have many rules, and we always enjoyed ourselves. What we liked. Life was assuming and fun, but my mind was full of questions. I wanted to learn and not to play children's games. I read a lot of books on science. The most interesting subject to me was chemistry. I was interested in the secrets of the sky and the earth, of the natural world. My friend Henry was interested in history, adventures, and dreams. Elizabeth loved us, had a very kind heart. Her goodness shone like a light in her calm, pleasant home. Her smile, soft voice, and beautiful eyes brought happiness to our lives. One day, when I was about 15 years old, we saw a terrible storm at our home in Berwick. It came from behind the mountains. I stayed and watched with excitement. As I stood by the door, I suddenly saw a stream of fire pour from the old and beautiful tree. It was about 60 feet from our home. When the lightning disappeared, only the bottom of the tree was left. The tree was completely destroyed. After that, I never forget the power of the lightning. I was very interested in electricity and in the power they exist in all natural things. I wanted to learn more about different kinds of science, so I started to study these subjects with even more excitement than before. And that time, perhaps an idea began to form in my mind. But the idea brought my only misery to my later years. When I reached the age of 17, my parents decided to send me to the University of Ingolstadt. But before I left, a terrible thing happened. It was the first of my many terrible things that happened in my life. Elizabeth became very ill, and her life was in danger. My mother did not want to leave Elizabeth's bedside. She looked after her day and night. After 3 days, Elizabeth got better, but then my mother quickly became very ill too. We soon realized that she was dying. As she lay in bed, close to death, she took my hand and Elizabeth's hand. "Children," she said, "I'm putting all my hopes in the two of you. I want you to marry. I believe that your marriage will bring you future happiness. It will make your father happy too." "Elizabeth, my love, I want you to take my place. Look after my younger children. I'm sorry that I'm leaving you all. It is so hard, but I must hope that I will meet you in another world." Without my mother, the house was empty and cold. Elizabeth was very sad, but she helped me and the rest of my family. I tried to forget about death. We had to live for the future. Elizabeth was sweet and kind to us, and I loved her very much. The day came when I had to leave for Ingolstadt. Henry Clavell spent the last evening with us. He could not come to university with me because his father wanted his son to work with him. It was difficult for me to leave my best friend. We did not want to say goodbye, but in the morning they were there. My father, Henry, Elizabeth, they watched me leave and promised to write. I arrived at Ingolstadt and started studying. I was good at science and decided to give all my time to it. On my first day, my new teacher, my Mr. Wildman, told me to forget everything that I already knew. If you want to become a real scientist, and he said, you must learn all the science. But I want you to teach you chemistry. That is an area of science that is growing, and we are discovering new things all the time. So, it is a very important subject. I listened carefully to Mr. Wildman. He took me to the laboratory and showed me his experiments. I was excited by everything that I saw. Mr. Wildman gave me a list of new books to read. At the end of the day, I was tired but happy. I was always remember that day because it decided my future. I became a good student. From the first day, chemistry was my favourite subject. Mr. Wildman was an excellent teacher, and I met the other scientists at the university. I worked on experiments in the laboratory all the time. Sometimes I stayed there all night until the stars disappeared from the sky. In the mornings, I was tired but happy. I went to my lessons and read a lot of books and understood more and more. For 2 years, I worked hard and did not visit Geneva. I wanted to discover where life came from. I wanted to experiment with science as much as possible. I wanted to create life, but first I had to understand death. I studied a human body. I also studied dead bodies. I was very interested in change from life to death. I saw how the body changes. I learned how bodies are made, and what was a result of all my experiments, I discovered the secret of life. I learned how to create life. I was very surprised and extremely happy. At first, I did not know what to do with my new powers. I could create life, but life needs to be inside the body. So, I went to hospitals and looked at more dead bodies. I took parts of human bodies back to my laboratory. After a few months, I began to create a human form. It was difficult work. I decided to make a person very large and tall. It was easier to work on the large body. I worked in a secret in my laboratory at the top of the house. The summer months passed. The weather was beautiful, but I never went outside. I was too busy. I did not want to stop my work for anything. I forgot all about my friends and my family. I did not want to write to them. I knew that my father and Elizabeth and Henry worried about me. I received letters, but I did not answer them. I thought only about my experiments. Autumn came. My work was nearly finished, but my health was not good. I could not eat or sleep. I did not talk to anyone. Every night I felt ill and very nervous. I was afraid, but I could not stop. One one cold night in November, I saw the first result of my hard work. The body of a man in front of me had no life in it. It was 1 o'clock in the morning, and rain was falling outside. Nervously, I used my tools to create life inside the body. Then I saw his yellow eyes open. He breathed and moved his arms and legs. Success! The body was moving. After years of work, here was the human life. I looked at him. How can I describe my feelings? The man was terribly ugly. He had thick black hair and white teeth, but his skin was yellow and dry. His eyes were very pale. He was a monster. After nearly 2 years of this experiment, I looked at the ugly monster and misery and fear filled my heart. My dream disappeared. I ran out of laboratory and went to my bedroom. I threw myself on the bed and tried to forget the monster. But when I fell asleep, I had wild dreams. I thought I saw Elizabeth. She was walking in Ingolstadt. When I kissed her, her lips became gold. It was like a kiss of death. I woke up, shaking with fear. The yellow light of a moon was shining through the windows, and the monster was standing next to my bed. He looked at me, his mouth opened and made some sounds, but I could not listen. The monster touched my arm, but I escaped from him. I ran downstairs one of the house and stayed away until early morning. Then slowly I went inside and listened for every sound. I do not ever want to see him again. I felt fear and misery, but I was also very sad. My dream was dead, and my hopes were destroyed. At 6 o'clock, I went outside again for the walk. The sky was black, and it was raining heavily. I was afraid to go back to my room, so I continued walking and got wetter and wetter and came to the hotel. I waited outside for a few minutes. Then I saw Henry Crevel. "My dear Frankenstein," he cried, "I am so glad to see you. I have just come from Geneva. At last, my father has given me permission to study at the university here. For the first time in many months, I felt happy and calm. I welcomed my friend happily. I took his hand, and in a few minutes I forgot all my misery. We walked towards university together. I am very pleased to see you, Henry," I said. "Tell me about my family. How are my father and brothers?" "Elizabeth, very well and very happy, but they are worried because you do not write letters to them." Henry stopped and looked at my face. "My dear Victor," he continued, "you seem so thin and pale, so ill. You look tired. Have you been awake all night?" You've guessed it right, Henry. I have been very busy with my piece of work. I have not rested enough, but I hope this work is now finished. I'm free. I'm arrived at the door of my house. I did not want to see the monster. I did not want Henry to see it. So I had told Henry to wait at the bottom of the stairs. I went up to my room. I opened the door in slowly. I went inside, but it was empty. The monster has run away. I thought. I could not believe my good luck. My enemy was not here. I went downstairs to get Henry. We went to my room and had breakfast, but I could not sit at the table. I was so happy. I jumped over the chairs and laughed wildly. My dear Victor, Henry cried. What is the matter? Do not laugh like that. You are ill. How did this happen? Don't ask me. Do not ask me, I cried. Then I thought I saw the monster in the room. I put my hands in the front of my eyes. Oh, save me! I shouted and fell on the floor. This was the beginning of a long, nervous illness for many months. Henry was my only nurse. He did not tell my family about my illness. He did not want to worry them. During my illness, I talked about the monster. Henry could not understand me. He believed that I was imagining strange things, but I returned to the same subject again and again. He realized that it was not a dream. There was a terrible reason for my illness. Slowly, Henry brought me back to the good house. I became calm again. One day, when I looked out of the windows and noticed new leaves on the trees, it was spring. I felt much better. Dear Clevel, I said, how can I thank you? You have been so kind to me. You came here to go to university, but you have been a nurse all winter. I am very sorry. It does not matter, Victor, he replied. You don't need to thank me. I will be happy if you are well. That is enough for me. But promise me one thing. Please write a letter to your father and to Elizabeth. You have been silent for a long time, and they are very worried about you. They do not really understand how ill you have been. Of course I will, I replied. They are the most important people in my life. They are always in my thoughts. Then, maybe, you are well enough to read this. Henry gave me a letter. It was a few days ago. It was for Elizabeth, and it was a very kind, friendly letter she wrote. She told me about my father and my brothers. She asked me to write back. I was very happy to read her letter and write back immediately. 2 weeks later, I was able to leave my room and return to university. But I do not want to study science now. I took everything out of my laboratory. When I saw my chemistry equipment, I felt very nervous again. I hated chemistry. Henry did not like science. He wanted to study foreign languages. I was happy to study with him, and I enjoyed my new classes. I did not want to leave Henry alone in the place he did not know very well. So we spent the summer together happily and decided to return to Geneva at the end of autumn. I was ready to go home. Winter arrived, and there was a lot of snow. The roads were terrible. It it was impossible to travel. I had to wait until the spring. The month of May arrived. I waited for a letter from my father before I decided on a date for my return. While we waited, Henry and I went on holiday. We walked in the countryside around Ingolstadt. It was a very beautiful, and we enjoyed ourselves. Henry was an excellent friend to travel with. My health was much better now. The blue sky and the lovely green fields made me strong. When we arrived back at university, we both felt calm and happy. A letter from my father was waiting for me. He had a terrible news. My sweetest younger brother William was dead. Last Thursday, we all went for a walk to Palace. What my father, the evening was warm and calm. William and Ernest were playing the game. Suddenly, we noticed that William was lost. We searched for him everywhere. Then we returned to the house, but he was not there. I found my dear son later, but he was dead. He was murdered. William had a small picture of your mother in his pocket, and his picture was stolen. Was this the reason for the murder of Victor? We were all so sad. Please come home to Geneva. Elizabeth spent all day crying. Only you can help her. Henry watched me as I read. My happiness turned to misery. I threw a letter on the table and covered my face with my hands. Frankenstein, cried Henry, my dear friend, what has happened? While Henry read the letter, I walked up and down the room. I must go to Geneva immediately. I told Henry my eyes were full of tears. Come with me to order the horses. I travelled to Geneva alone. My journey was very sad and lonely. So many thoughts came to my mind. I have not been to Geneva for 6 years. I said to myself, and a lot of things have changed. I felt afraid, but I did not know why. The road ran by the side of Lake Geneva. I looked up at the mountains. I loved the view, but I felt so unhappy. As I crossed the lake in the boat, a storm began. I watched the lightning on the house through the heavy rain. It was beautiful but frightening. Dear sweet little brother Henry, I thought, is this a storm for you? Suddenly, I stopped. There was someone behind a tree. No, I thought, it cannot be. Yes, it was a monster. I saw him clearly when the lightning lit up the sky. I knew that was him. It was a terrible, ugly monster that I created in Ingolstadt. Why was he here? Then a thought came into my mind. Was he the murderer of my little brother? I knew immediately that he was. I looked again for the monster. I saw him climbing the mountains, then he disappeared in the grey rock. Oh, why did I came Why did I create that terrible monster? I thought about my experiments. I remembered another rainy night 2 years ago. The night they gave him life. My experiment, my own creation has murdered my brother. I thought nobody can imagine my misery. I could not tell my father the true story. I could not tell anyone. I arrived home early in the morning. They have found the murderer, Victor, said my brother Ernest. How did they do that? I cried. Nobody can follow him. It is impossible. Ernest did not understand what I was saying. The police have arrested Justin Mortius. She'd murdered William. I looked at Ernest. Justin was a sweet girl who helped Elizabeth. She worked hard and looked after William. Elizabeth was very kind to her, and everybody loved her. When her mother was dying, Justin was her nurse. Nobody can't believe that. I cried. It is wrong. We found a picture of her mother in her pocket. She stole it from William. That proves it. It doesn't. We were soon joined by Elizabeth. She was 6 years older too, and she was more beautiful now. She welcomed me warmly, but her eyes were full of sadness. I did not believe that Justin is guilty. She is not a criminal, said Elizabeth. I hope that we can prove it, I replied. The trial was next day, and we defended Justine. But I could not say who the real criminal was. We tried to prove that Justin was not guilty. Justin did not know why the picture was in her pocket. She could not explain it. The judge did not believe her. The court decided that she was guilty. The punishment was death. I felt very unhappy. I was responsible for the death of 2 people. My little brother, William, and kind, sweet Justin. I was responsible for my family's pain and misery. My father and brother and Elizabeth was all suffering, and I could not help them. I could not make them all happy again. And I had a terrible feeling. There will be more tears, I thought. The monster will return. After the trial, we went back to Berwick. I liked staying there. I left the lake often at night. I waited till the rest of the family were asleep and took the boat into the water sometimes. I went into the middle of the lake. It was quiet and calm, and I could sit in the boat with my thoughts. My family were still crying for William. Justin was dead, and the true murderer was free. But I could not tell Elizabeth my thoughts. I was the real criminal. I was in a state of complete misery. I knew that I was responsible. I was guilty because the monster was my creation. I wanted to find him and destroy him. Nearly 2 months after the death of Justin, I decided to leave the house and travel to the mountain. I wanted to go to the Terminal next. It was a place that I knew well. I often visited when I was a boy. I went on the horse for the first part of our journey. It was the middle of August, and the weather was good. I travelled through the valley. The high mountains around me were wonderful. I loved their mystery, and the power of nature made me less afraid. I crossed the river Earth, and arrived in the valley of Chamonix. It was beautiful. There was snow on the top of the mountains, and between the trees there were small, pretty houses. In the evening, I came to the village, tired after my journey. I fell asleep immediately. The next day, I decided to climb to the top of one of the mountain veldt. The path was difficult and dangerous. It was raining and the sky was dark. When I arrived at the top, it was nearly midday. I saw on the rock and looked down below. Was the great glacier like a sea of ice? Soon, the cloud disappeared, and I climbed down onto the glacier. I spent 2 hours crossing it. Then I stood and looked at the mountain of Mount Blanc and Mountain Vert. The sun came out above the clouds. The ice shone brightly. Suddenly, I saw the man on the ice. He was quite far away, but he was coming quickly towards me. The man took long steps across the ice. Then I realized, who was it? It was the monster. I was angry. I was frightened. I wanted to fight him. I wanted to kill him. Go away, you terrible monster, I screamed, or stay and die. I want to destroy you. But I could not bring back the 2 people that you have killed. Every day, everybody hates me, and you hate me too, replied the monster. But you created me. You were responsible for me. You made me, but you want to destroy me. You do not know my misery. How can you play with life like this? Please listen to me and help me. Do what I ask. Then I will leave you and be good. I will never see you again. I will not make any trouble for you. And I will not hurt anyone again. If you refuse, I will kill all your friends. You can't understand how I feel, continued the monster. The sky is much kinder to me than people are. The mountains and cold ice are my only home. You say that I am the murderer, but you want to murder me. Believe me, Frankenstein, at first I was kind and good, but people were unkind to me. The law says that the person can defend himself, even if he is guilty. Please listen to my story, then you can judge me. When I heard the monster's words, I felt kinder towards him. Yes, I created him, I was responsible for his happiness or unhappiness. I decided that I must listen to his story. When he went across the ice, and I followed him. It started raining again. We sat down by the fire in a small hut on the mountain. The monster began to speak. At first I was alone. I was hungry. I took some clothes from your home, but I was cold. I do not remember very much, but I remember the forest near Ingolstadt. I quickly learned how to live here. I ate leaves and fruits, and I drank from a river. I was not quite human, so I did not need good food. I did not know who I was. I did not know where I came from, but I learned about life. I enjoyed a song of the birds, what I saw light and dark, the sun in the day, the moon at night. Sometimes I searched for food all day. I did not know how to make a fire. I could not get warm. One day I saw a little hut on a hill. The door was open, so I went inside. The old man sat by the fire. He turned when he heard a noise. He looked at me and screamed. Then he ran outside, across the fields, as quickly as he could. There is some bread, milk and cheese on the table. It was a man's breakfast. I was very hungry. I ate it quickly. I liked the hut because it was dry and warm. I fell asleep on the floor. Later, I continued walking across the fields. Evening came, and I arrived in the village. It seemed so wonderful. I looked at the houses and other buildings. Vegetables grew in the gardens. I went into the farmhouse. The people in there looked at me and screamed. Everyone in the village became angry. Children ran away, but men attacked me with stones. I escaped to the fields. I was frightened and unhappy. I found another small hut. I went inside. I could not stand up inside, but I slept on the floor. I was happy to find a dry place. Then I felt that I could escape from the bad weather. I could escape from the cruel world of people. I stayed in my hut. Nobody saw me there. I cleaned and covered the holes in the wall with wood and stones. Near the hut was a pool of water. I found a cup to drink from. I had to steal food, but I was safe. At the side of the hut was a small house. I watched the people who lived there. Later, I learned their names. There was an old man, Mr. DeLacy, and his son, Felix, and a daughter, Ajiva. I listened to their voices. Slowly, I learned some words and began to understand their language. I found it easy to copy the sounds. At first, I only learned the words like sister, brother, bread, and wood. Later, I could speak and understand more and more. I enjoyed my simple life living next to the DeLacy's. The DeLacy's came from a good family in France, but they were quite poor. They grew vegetables in their garden, but they were often hungry. They had a little money for milk and bread, so I did not steal any food from them. I ate what I could find in the forest. Agiva was a sweet, kind and young woman. I wanted to be her friend. I thought she was beautiful and good. She made me happy. I watched Felix go into the forest for every morning. He stayed there all day. When he returned, he was carrying wood for the fire. He worked very hard, so I decided to help them. At night, I went into the forest and cut wood for the family fire. I left the pile of wood outside the door of a house. They were very pleased, and I enjoyed helping them. Now Felix had more time for work in his garden or repairs to the house. I tried to help them in other ways too. I swept the snow from my path. I watched Felix working, and then I did some of his work at night. Then they never saw me. They did not know who was helping them, but they were always grateful. I watched the Lacey family. I learned a lot from their love and their kindness. They were beautiful and polite. Mr. Lacey went for walks with his son. Geneva often sang to her father. Their lives were simple and good, but I saw my face in the pool of water. They could not love me or be kind to me. I was an ugly monster. When the family went out, I went into the house. I looked at their books and slowly learned to read. You gave me intelligence for their books. I learned about the world. I learned about different countries, about history and science. More than everything, I wanted friends, I wanted love. But I frightened people. They thought I was cruel. They thought that I wanted to hurt them. One day, I tried to talk to old Mr. De Lacy. His eyes were very bad, and he could not see anything. He will talk to me, I thought. He could not see me, so he will not judge me. I waited until Angela and Felix were out of the house. I knocked at the door. Who's there? Said the old man. Excuse me, I replied. I am a tired traveller. Please, can I sit near your fire for the few minutes? Coming in, said Mr. De Lacy. You can sit here with me and rest. I'm alone. I told Mr. De Lacy I have no friends. I need help, but I'm afraid to ask people for it. When I met people, they send me away. They see me as a terrible monster, but I'm not a criminal. I believe you, said the old man. I can only judge your words, but how can I help you? There was a noise at the entrance to the house. Felix and Angela were coming home. It was time to speak. Oh, please save me and protect me, I cried. I have no family or friends. Only you. I know you are kind and good. I need you. But who are you? Cried Mr. De Lacy. The door opened. Felix and Angela saw me and their father together. I cannot describe their faces. They thought that I was attacking Mr. De Lacy. They then looked at me. They started screaming. Angela fell to the ground in fear. Felix pulled me away from his father. He picked up a stick and hit me very hard. I was in pain, very unhappy. Quickly, I escaped and went back to my hut. Okay, so I'm going to stop here on page 24. In chapter 6, the monster was once a wife. Okay, so I will stop there. I'm going to take a break from reading classic horror story of Frankenstein. I guess you enjoy it so far. Seems quite a bit frightening, but I hope you like it so far. Okay, so I'll see you in a short while, and happy Halloween.